Good Wednesday evening, listeners, and thank you for joining me tonight. For those of you who are joining me live and on the air, I thank you for tuning in to tonight's podcast. This week has been a busy week, as those of you who are in the tri state area, you know that we have been buried under snow. We had a monster snowstorm over the weekend, and it seems as though we just can't get buried out. So, for those of you who are tuned in tonight, I thank you for tuning in for tonight's conversation. I was so backed up with emails that I literally had to catch up with a lot of them uh, today, this afternoon. I did read them at the onset of the week. I try to as soon as I get them, but I had to literally catch up with emails from my listeners and those of you who subscribe to my blog. I thank you for those emails. I try to read them all. Trust me, I do. So I thank you for tuning in. And, just reading my emails is what helped me come up with tonight's conversation. And tonight's conversation is, are prenuptial agreements smart? And the reason why it kind of, I don't know, I thought about it and I was like, wow, somebody sent me an email and I was like, do I really want to talk about it? But then someone posted something on Facebook. One of my followers, we follow each other, a mutual follower, he posted a story on Facebook about prenuptial agreements. And I'm seeing that language a lot about prenuptial agreements. So I was like, all right. When I received the email from, one of my listeners, she said, how do you feel about prenuptial agreements? What's your take on prenuptial agreements, Miss Tracy? That's how they address me in email, Miss Tracy, Black Queen. What do you think about prenuptial agreements? Well, I've never been in front of a prenuptial agreement because I've never been in prenuptials. However, I've I have friends who have been in front of prenuptial agreements, and it's funny because when I was talking to my sister tonight, and she said to me, "What's your conversation about tonight?" And I said to her, "Are prenuptial agreements smart?" And she said, "Oh, did you get that idea or that conversation from Candy and Todd?" And I was like, "Who is Candy and Todd?" And she started talking about, I think it's the housewives of somebody, but they're going through a divorce. And I think she didn't have a prenup. I don't know. I listened, but I didn't listen because I don't follow that show. So a lot of my topics are real conversations, real emails that I receive from people. I don't know Candy and Todd. It just so happens that because she watches that show, she thought that I was coming up with tonight's topic from Candy and Todd. But I guess Candy and Todd's situation is aligning with this week's topic. I received an email from one of my listeners saying, am I familiar with the prenup? Because she got engaged last year and her fiance, that's true. My sister and I, we are very different. And this listener of mine, she got engaged last year. Her fiance presented her with a prenuptial agreement, and I don't know. I think what pissed her off was the fact that he didn't mention it prior to them having dinner. He kind of sprung it on her at dinner. I don't know. I can't tell based on her email. But she said that he came with the paperwork at dinner, over dinner, and he wanted to discuss it. And she was hurt by it. She saw it as, I don't know, a lack of trust. She saw the presentation of a prenuptial as if he's setting the marriage up to fail. She's been so many different ideas in her head that I can tell that she was really, really upset. But I think that, I don't know. I think that her boyfriend is her boyfriend, or her fiance, I should say, he should approach it differently. And as I'm talking about this, I am receiving comments in my chat, because you can chat with me as well. Some of you do, but not all of you do chat concerning the subject. So I am chatting with someone, and she's someone that I grew up with. We grew up on the same block. So I'm excited by the fact that she's here. And she added her 2 cents by saying that marriage is more about business than about love, because that's not the first time that I've heard that. People do say that marriage is more about business than it is love. It should be business first and then love. But the young lady that listens to my show, she's definitely seeing it from a love point of view, and her fiance is seeing it from a business perspective. So when she had asked me my opinion on it, she said, "Are prenuptials smart?" And I said, "They're considered not only smart, but proactive and protective, because you also get to protect assets, and no one is surprised if the marriage is dissolved." That was my first response to her. She came back and said, "Well, who's thinking about the marriage dissolving? Is he automatically setting the marriage up for failure?" And I said to her, "No, I think he's actually preparing the marriage and setting the marriage up financially. I think that it is a financial agreement more than anything else." And, I've had shows in the past, and she knows this because she's an avid follower, where I discussed how finances should be one of your discussions if you're talking about marriage and spending your life with someone, because someone may have bad spending habits and you do not. That would automatically be a red flag in the relationship. Because what did I say? 9 times out of 10, when individuals get divorced, it is due to financial reasons. Finances are the reason why a lot of couples, they break up. They wind up in divorce court. So when she asked me, what I thought about the fact that he had presented her with a prenup, and if it was smart, if it was a bad idea, I said to her, "Not at all. I don't think so. I think that he is looking to protect his assets." So she wanted to know what that meant. Well, I don't know what his assets are. I can only speak to what assets may be. And I know she's probably tuning into the show tonight. So what I did was, I've had conversations with a couple of my girlfriends. And one of my girlfriends I spoke to last night, she told me that at this point in her life, if she got married, she would absolutely have a prenuptial agreement. She owned properties. She has a banging 401k. She has a lot of assets to consider, which is why she would definitely want to present her fiance with a prenup, because she's like, "These are things that I acquired prior to the marriage." That's why it's called a prenuptial agreement, because this is the agreement that you would have before the nuptials. I think about that as well. I'm like, wow, my girlfriend has a point. When you have assets and you are marrying another individual, these assets need to be considered, because they're your assets prior to marriage. And a lot of times you want to ensure that if you're going to have a prenuptial agreement, that it includes those assets that you acquire after the marriage. Now, I talked to another girlfriend of mine who, she was in a relationship with someone, and now this someone wants to get married, and he said to her, "You have to sign a prenup." That pissed her off. She's like, "Oh, I'm not signing a prenup." However, she saw it as a red flag. She felt like he wanted her to sign a prenup because she anticipated him cheating. And that's because I think that in a previous relationship, he cheated. So because he cheated and he lost assets and he wound up paying out a big alimony payment, he feels like this time around he's going to be smart and he's going to have her sign a prenup. So my girlfriend was pissed. I could tell she was annoyed. She's like, I'm not signing a prenup. F him. I know he's thinking that, he's going to cheat on me and just walk scot free. She said, and I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to allow him to do that to me. And I said to her, well, why are you looking at it like that? I think that when he's introducing a prenup, he's also open to a conversation about it because of course he's going to want to conversate about it, and in this conversation you stress what you think should be added, what you think should be negotiated. Like, this is your time to negotiate the prenuptials before the nuptials. Because one of the things she wanted was for them to live in their own houses. He has a house, she has a house, and she wanted them to get married but to live in their prospective homes. She was like, why not? Cheryl Lee Ralph is doing it. And I said, I think what works for her may not necessarily be the antidote for you. You want to have your own thing going. And of course, he completely disagreed with it because who gets married and live in separate homes? I mean, hey, if it works for you, then that's fine. But it's not typical or necessarily ideal. But I think that both individuals have to agree on what the agreement should include. And the person that's presenting it should definitely share their ideologies of it. So I think that having a prenuptial agreement avoids just nasty litigation, in the event of a divorce. And my friend whose boyfriend was considering marrying her with this prenup, this would be his second marriage. And his first marriage was a nasty divorce. Um, I won't go into details as to why, but I think that she had reservations about that as well. But I know that having a prenuptial agreement, it also signifies a nasty divorce or nasty litigations. And we hear about these things. And I think my sister went on to say that with Candy and Todd, she didn't have a prenup. And her mother tried to tell her to do a prenup because he had less. This is what she said. My sister said that her husband had less. So I think that when individuals hear about prenups, it's because they feel as though they have less. And that's fine because I think about all of the people. You know what? Let me rephrase that. I think about a couple of boyfriends that I could have married in the past. And I was not smart or privy or wise too much to a prenuptial agreement. So I didn't have much, but I think at the time I did at least have 401ks. So that's an asset. So I think at the time it was okay that they had more because they was the man in the relationship. I didn't mind it. But would I have known what I would want mentioned in a prenuptial agreement? I guess the first thing I would do is I would get advice from an attorney because I think that if you're gonna have a prenuptial agreement, you should do it under a legal authority. You want to have advice from an attorney. Both of you want to have an advice from attorney, and these attorneys should review the prenuptial, hers and yours, to maybe litigate, discuss, and negotiate some things that may be included in this prenuptial agreement. Are prenuptial agreements smart? I think they are. At this point in my life, would I have a prenuptial agreement? Probably so. If he came up with the idea, I would be in agreement with it as well. Because as you grow in your career, as you grow in life, you gain assets. And these assets, they're what you earned. I remember, I always took care of my parents' financials. My mom and my dad, I always took care of their financials, but it was certain things I didn't want to know, such as burial information, like things like that. Like I didn't want to know that. I just wanted to know certain things, and I wanted to know them when it came time, not before time. So I remember one time when I was talking to my mother, she was talking about her pension and I think of my father's pension. And I saw how they did it. Like they left their pensions to each other. And I said to her, how did you do that? What was that about? She said, it was something that we agreed upon when we knew that this was going to happen throughout our work lives, that we would have pensions. So we discussed how our pensions would be allocated, if one of us passed away. She said, because this is something that we acquired, but it was after they were married. And of course, when my parents were married, they didn't have a prenuptial. They built their relationship and their marriage together. But things are different now. My mother comes from an era when you married a man, the man took care of the house, and that was it. Because my father took care of the house. Although my mom worked, he still took care of the house. He mandated the home. But now you have professional men and women who are owning and buying and acquiring things on their own. They're doing this outside of marriage. And because you are working hard, and these are things that you are acquiring, you want to protect those assets. And I said to my listener, just think about it. Think about what if it were you, and if you would acquire things, whether it be a 401k, whether it be an inheritance, whether it be owning your own property, whatever the case may be, you want to protect those assets, and a prenuptial agreement may be necessary. So I think that instead of being offended, instead of being upset, you have to look at it both ways. You have to see it from a two-way street. You can't see it one sided. And you can't always think that ding, 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 dings, bells are going off and these red flags are flying, because that's not always the case. If it were me, I'd want to have a discussion about it. I'd want to discuss what my assets, are. I want to discuss what his expectations are. I remember when Michael Jordan married his second wife and she had twins, one of the things in their prenuptial was that she received a certain amount of money if she stayed married to him after 7 years. Because of course, Michael Jordan is a baller. So, naturally he was going to have a prenuptial in place, because I don't think that was the case in his first marriage. I think that we live and we learn. And unfortunately, some of us learn painfully. And when we learn from these mistakes painfully, we're not prone or deemed to repeat them. I don't think that a prenup necessarily means that the other person loves you less. I don't think that the prenup means that they're planning to leave you in the future. I simply think that signing a prenup is a life jacket. It's almost like insurance for something that is binding between two people. So I think that when you think about, is a prenuptial agreement smart, you have to think about how that particular agreement is going to serve you. How is it gonna serve you? Because some people, when they hear it and they think about all that they've acquired, they know the answer hands down. Oh, heck yeah, I would get a prenup. I would get a prenup. So, wow, I was just reading this message. I will have to work the rest of my life because I did not get what I deserved in a divorce. Now that we are in retirement age, I see that I gave up all of that money. And that's a very good point because people do get divorced and they leave money on the table. What does that mean? That means that if he had a pension plan and he don't want you to have the pension plan, or he fights against the pension plan, you don't get the pension plan. If the pension plan is brought up in the divorce, you can say what your expectations are with regards to pension. I've had friends who've gotten divorced and they never leave the pension on the table. They always make sure that they're covered in the pension. Now, I do know a gentleman who got divorced and his wife was just nasty to him. And she was so focused on hurting him that she forgot to include the pension in her divorce. And when they got to court, the judge said to her, "Oh, so I see that you're not going to collect the pension." And she said, "Oh my God." She said, "I forgot about that. Yes, yes." She said, "I want the pension." And he said, "Too late." He said, "You were too busy focused on being bitter that you forgot to ask about the pension." She wasn't smart, nor did she seek legal counsel. And my male friend, walked away with a fat pension because his ex-wife forfeited it. She missed it in the divorce papers. He didn't have a prenuptial. And I think that because he did not have a prenuptial, he was prepared to pay it. But because of her ignorance concerning the paperwork around it, she left money on the table. And some people do that. They be like, "Oh, I don't want alimony." I guess that's about pride. Why not? You know? I think that is funny when Tyler Perry bring these things up in his movie because he want people to think about it, to think better. Because now you have men asking for alimony, especially if they've raised the kids or they take care of the kids. I was telling my sister tonight when she was talking about the whole Todd and Candy thing, how Todd raised the kids because Candy was traveling. I don't even know these people. But she said that he wanted alimony and he wanted the kids to live with him. And my sister talked as if this was just impossible. And I said to her, no, because if he had a rearing in their raising, it is something that a man will bring up in divorce proceedings, and they will ask for alimony based on that. I mean, look at Haley Berry. Same thing I said to my sister. She wound up paying alimony to both of her children's fathers. She paid them alimony. And then you started having men saying, "Oh, wow, now that women are doing it, now that men are doing it, women don't like it." It's like the tables have turned because women are doing things for themselves. And because they're doing things for themselves, they are building assets. So now, what happens when you get married young? Because when you get married young, I know my assistant, she got married young. Her and her college boyfriend, they got married fresh out of college. Um, they're both in their careers, but not fully. They're not fully vetted in careers as of yet. So they will have different things that will come up, such as their 401ks, such as, their pensions and things like that. Exactly. Mary J. Blige, she had to pay alimony to her husband, and those were not her children. And he had a nerve to say that they were not her children, but they had gotten used to a lifestyle that she had provided. And you know what? Mary J, she she took it like a champ. She paid it like a champ. And I think it was only for 7 years because I think she's not paying it anymore. But look how her career skyrocketed after that divorce. So it kind of tell you where the weight was. But that's a subject for another conversation. I want to stick to the subject. And I think the point of the matter is that when you marry young and you have an opportunity to build together and build smart. When you marry when you're older and you have assets, a prenuptial agreement is something that you'll consider. And you'll consider it because you have assets. And to my listener, think about it. If you owned a house, if you owned cars, if you had an inheritance, wouldn't you want to protect that? Or is that something that you will be so willing to share? And isn't it going to depend on the terms of the divorce? If he cheat, if you cheat, doesn't the terms change? And shouldn't those terms be included in your prenup? Shouldn't all of these things be ironed out and discussed in your prenuptial? Don't get mad, get smart. Plan ahead. Get your life jacket. Get these things in place before you actually say, I do. Handle your business before you get to the altar because you love him. I'm sure he loves you. But at the end of the day, it's like the listener here said marriage is about business. Business can equal love, but you want to handle your business. You want to discuss the finances. You want to know what is what in the marriage and in case the marriage is dissolved. And whatever your fears are, whatever your concerns are, you discuss that with him or you discuss it with her. Discuss those fears. Discuss those anxieties and deal with them now. Because if you wait until you are in it, you're just floating without a life raft, or you're just floating without a boat. You're just floating. It's best to discuss it now. Don't be offended by it. Embrace it. Have the conversation. Go back to the table, even if you have to get an attorney. Is a prenuptial agreement smart? Absolutely. Absolutely. And just because the other party is initiating it, don't see it as a red flag. See it as an opportunity to share your 2 cents and what you think is going to work for the both of you. A prenuptial agreement is the way to go if it's necessary. If not, then you build together, you trust together. And if an agreement should come in between that or after that, that's fine. Just get that in writing, get it in front of an attorney, and make it stick. But I think prenuptial agreements are smart. And I think that when considering one, do it with a counsel, legal counsel. So this way you know what you both should expect. I hope that answered your question. And I hope that I touched on topics that kind of helps your decision making. And I thank those who tuned in tonight. Sensible Creations. Thank you. Oh God, I have chills just saying that. People have no idea. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for adding your 2 cents. And remember, there is nothing wrong with a prenup. You'd rather be smart than ass out. Until next week, have a great one. Bye.